So welcome everyone to the Philadelphia Police Advisory Commission's November meeting. We thank you all for joining us. My name is Rhonda Goldfein. We'll go through a roll call of the other commissioners. And I can't see everyone, so if your face is present, but I still call your name, forgive me. Shauna Long.
I do not see Sean here.
Okay. Mujib Chaudhry. I know I saw Mujib.
Yeah, I believe I saw Mujib as well.
Ben Geffen.
He is here.
George Mosey.
Yep, George is here.
Bilal Qayyum.
Yep.
Great. Michael Ramming.
Do not see Michael Ramming.
Michael Werman.
He is here.
Great. And Sarah Young and Han. Excellent. So welcome all. I want to take the prerogative of the chair's position to give a shout out to our colleague Ben Geffen and the Public Interest Law Center for all of the hard work they're doing to make sure that elections retain their integrity. So keep up the good work, Ben. We appreciate you in our nonpartisan way. Anthony, would you like to introduce the staff?
Sure. My name is Anthony Arachi. I'm the Acting Executive Director of the Police Advisory Commission. We have here with us Janine Zajac, Angelica Hendricks, Talia Grimmage. There's Angelica. Danny, who is the captain of the ship here. And I think that's all I see. Did I miss anybody? I don't think so.
I don't think Stacey's joining us.
No, okay. And that is us who are present.
Thank you. Moving on, do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the October meeting? So Ben Geffen is a motion, moving. I am seconding. All in favor of the commissioners who are authorized to vote? Okay. Danny, I'm assuming that you did that count.
Yeah, it looks like everyone said yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
For the notes.
So I just want to talk briefly about what's been happening since we last met. As we know, since our October meeting, we've elected a new president. We have a new executive director, and we've heard overwhelmingly from Philadelphians by way of the ballot initiative that they want civilian oversight of the police. And we always knew that there was the strong sentiment, but we're grateful for the ballot initiative that gives us an opportunity, gives civilian oversight an opportunity for greater permanency, greater resources, greater funding, greater power. So I think that we are on the verge of a good thing. As City Council works out the details of the new entity, the Police Advisory Commission would like to have an active role in shaping how oversight happens in Philadelphia. Based on our long history of doing this, the institutional memory of the staff and the experience in this area, we feel like we have a lot to offer to City Council. And in fact, Hans Manos, our previous executive director, and our new acting executive, Anthony Arachi, developed a plan that they have shared with City Council on what are the items that need to be included to make oversight meaningful and live up to the promise that is available, and really to serve Philadelphia in the way that we need to be served. So Anthony, in his report, is going to go through that plan in greater detail. I just wanted to point out that this is an important step forward for civilian oversight. And from the current Police Advisory Commission's perspective, we are glad to see that come. So with that, Anthony, may I hand it over to you for 2 statements?
Yes, you may. All right. So because we have a presentation later, we're going to do, I'm going to talk about what we sent over to City Council first, because the second statement sort of leads into the presentation by the PPD. So yeah, so the ballot question passed, and we were all very excited about that. So what we tried to do was essentially offer some guidance as to what something like this might look like, and what oversight in Philadelphia could mean, and what it might cost, and really just start a conversation. It's not a full proposal. It's not. It's by no means a demand. It's really just something that we think could work using some modeling from other places and some ideas unique to Philadelphia. So
Also,
essentially, like an expansion of oversight in Philadelphia would look something like a special investigations unit, which would focus on the primary things that we do now, which is policy, practice, and custom, and essentially continuing the current work just in an expanded, more in-depth way. Misconduct investigations. And if this was something that we heard from the community and council was something that they were interested in. So we tried to offer what a unit like this would look like and cost based on what internal affairs already does and what complaints against police based on the numbers that already come in. So we sent those sort of numbers and figures to council, and just so they would have an idea of what would be effective and what they, what they should be considering as they further develop it. Another aspect that we advocate for is a community engagement unit. So this is, now we do community engagement, we do public hearings, but now we don't do them nearly as effectively as an oversight agency could do them. And that would be dedicated to events, training, and outreach to all parts of the city. And it would sort of be a dedicated functioning unit to understand the concerns of the community, transmit the new CPOC's work, and basically do constituent services, right? Like help people navigate. Another unit would be research and analysis. And this would support the entire organization with meaningful data and interpretation and research capability, support the police department in that we can basically provide analysis to any emerging or longstanding problems or issues. Another aspect would be audits and monitoring. Now, for that relates specifically to the internal affairs function. Basically, it's oversight for discipline and investigations. So we do some of this now. We just do it. We have to be selective, and this is where we audit a case. We would essentially examine an investigation for best practices and competence and really any other outstanding issues. We would do that and then provide, in theory, a document to the commissioner as to, investigation A, these were issues that arose. This was how it was charged. We think it could have been done differently, or it was excellent and it was done perfectly. Monitoring is essentially has a dual function. When you monitor a case, and we do this now selectively, which is where if a complaint comes through our office, we guide it through the sort of internal affairs process. We'll sit in on interviews. We'll sit during the complainant's interviews. We ask questions. We basically are present, right? And in the hopes that our presence will enhance the quality of the investigation and increase the comfort of the community member that made the complaint with the outcome and the process. The next one is kind of a really bold one. It's an administrative prosecution unit that we go into significant detail about, now that is the PAC is currently involved in a PBI reimagining. Now this suggestion to council is separate and distinct from that, but ideally this would be something that can increase public confidence by taking administrative prosecution of cases that currently occurs for non-criminal misconduct cases and putting it in a separate and independent entity like the new CPOC, where you wouldn't have, I mean, you would increase procedural justice because you it wouldn't be housed within the police department, right? So you could have greater confidence that the prosecution unit was independent and working as an advocate for the case and the complainant in the case. That's actually, I'm kind of really hoping for that one. That's a pretty exciting one, I think. The other one is a training unit, which I guess is what it says it is, which would train and train new and existing staff, incoming staff, provide training to the community, and hopefully, with a little luck, the police department, where we could talk about those issues further in both like in service trainings and in academy trainings. In a nutshell, that's kind of the framework of our idea. We also included in what we released today a cost analysis of what some things like this might cost. I encourage all of you to check it out on social media.
I actually put it in the chat if anyone wants to read it. It's also on our website and can be found on social media, like Anthony mentioned.
And the thing to keep in mind when you're looking at it, it's not the be all end all, right? It's a starting point and things that we think are important, but everybody's voice is relevant in this conversation. And this was just so that the community and other stakeholders could understand what something like this would look like, right? Like what a professional oversight, expanded oversight organization would and could look like. And any and all of it can be changed or expanded, but we thought it was important so that people understood sort of, you know, this is what it might look like if you created it. So please, if you're interested, please check it out. We think it's pretty good and we hope you like it. The second part that we wanted to discuss was, of course, the Walter Wallace incident. And we did a statement on that. And obviously it's been a rough couple of weeks for Philadelphia generally and specifically. So the key takeaway and the key lead in for the conversation that occurs after incidents like this are what do you do next, right? I mean, like, what do you do as a city? What do you do as a police department? What do you do as an oversight organization? So what we did is we tried to inform the community as to what to expect for the investigation that remains ongoing. What were the sort of rules of the road so people would know what was going to happen. And the other part was what issues come up, right? And I think everyone knows that the primary issues that came out of that were, how does the police department deal with people in mental health crisis, and what can 911 sort of do differently to better handle sort of these calls that may go outside the scope and expertise of a strictly law enforcement response. Right. So, I mean, those were the primary issues that came out of that. And those were the things that we wanted to sort of explore further. And so that leads us into what our presentation is for tonight, which is the police department had for some time been trying to sort of get the ball rolling on a reimagination of 911 response. This incident occurred at the very beginning of that. So what we invited Staff Inspector Healy to come talk about was what these reforms look like, what they hope to accomplish in the future, and basically have a small conversation about it. So I guess without further ado, if Inspector Healy is ready, and we can get started.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
We sure can.
Perfectly clear, sir.
Okay, I apologize. Every time I put my video up, my laptop crashes, so you don't get to see my face tonight. So I'm happy to talk about some of the things we're doing in radio. And like I said, it's regrettable that a lot of these things are being perceived as kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. In reality, they've been very thought out and deliberate as part of the MacArthur project. We've been working for several years on creating a co-responding model, whereas, let me take a step back. We have 3,100 police officers who are crisis intervention trained in Philadelphia. That's the largest number of crisis intervention trained officers in any large department that I'm aware of. And the goal in the crisis intervention model is to actually train approximately 25% of your first responders, not the entire department, but those people that actually intersect with people that are in crisis. We surpassed that a long time ago, and we have no intentions of stopping. The program's a volunteer program, and some people have criticized it as such. However, we have never had a shortage of people who want to volunteer for the class. So there has been discussions of making it mandatory. And if at that time when we no longer have volunteers, that would probably be where we need to go. But at this point here, we do almost a class a month, or I'm sorry, except for the summers, we do about a class a month of about, we were doing about 30 officers, but during the COVID, we've had to reduce the class size to about 15. We've expanded the scope to include detectives, which we had not in the past. That was one of the initiatives that Commissioner Outlaw wanted to do. She wanted to expand the scope. But the important thing is to note that we've had this program since 2007. We have so many officers ingrained in the department now that we actually have about 150 detectives that have actually been promoted from police officer into the rank. So they are CIT trained. So that's the first resource we have out there. And I think it's important to note, and if I take up too much time, please just, you can unmute or you can mute me and shut me up. I oversee the crisis intervention training program, so it's near and dear to my heart. I've been involved in this since 2007. The important thing I think in Philadelphia is this. A lot of the CIT models across the country focus predominantly on mental illness or in our scenario here, we are a little more expansive. We include crisis. Now I say that because any human being can be in crisis. I've been in crisis. So during the training program, and actually what we do is we tell people, or I'm sorry, I tell people the things that I've done wrong and how I've done them wrong. And now that I know differently, when we do the de-escalation component, but the notion of the crisis is incredibly important because what we're trying to do is make sure that that officer that intersects with that individual in crisis, whether it's you just lost a child at the mall or you're suffering from severe mental illness or there's a developmental disability. It really doesn't matter at that moment in time, as long as the officer can shift gears faster, realize what he or she has, and then they can actually de-escalate much easier. So that's the resource we have out in the field now. So what we're trying to do now is we've explored other options that are out there. We don't want to do away with CIT. We're looking to augment it. And that's really what the whole purpose of if you've heard on the radio recently, is we embedded a mental health clinician in police radio. That is the beginning of our co-responding model program. And what that does is we ultimately want to have police officers out in the field, a select few who are teamed up with mental health clinicians who can respond as a team. Now, this is in addition to the 3,100 police officers we already have CIT trained. So that's what we're trying to do now. The mental health clinician that's embedded is helping us to identify ways to identify those calls that are crisis-related calls, which are not as easy as you would think. It's easy to say, yeah, somebody's not on their meds or something along those lines. But like I said, we have a much broader category, and being able to respond and so the officers can shift gears faster. We're trying to get more information out of the call takers. So that is what the embedded clinician is doing now. In the future, we're looking to have one around the clock, actually to assist in the de-escalation and with the dispatchers, actually hands-on dealing with calls. But primarily right now, the clinician her job is to help us develop a mechanism to better identify crisis calls. And towards that vein, we just recently implemented a mental health screening question. If you call 911 right now, we have a mandatory series of questions that we're asking people to answer. Now, I'll be honest with you, right now it's brand new. We put it out. We're going to put it out for 30 days and reevaluate. It's like if you call about a stolen car, you're getting questioned about, are you in crisis? Or it may be a little too expansive at this point, but we're looking to just see how it goes right now. We're catching a lot more information, and the police radio are tagging many more calls as crisis-related calls. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's a very, very good thing. So a lot of that information is being pummeled or sent down to the police officers. And so they have all that information at their disposal long before they get to a call. Regrettably, a lot of times officers have to get on scene, figure out what's going on, and then shift gears. Hopefully now we'll be able to shift gears a little faster. But the process really ultimately is they call it a triage desk. And that's where the embedded clinician, co-responder, if you can imagine, this is so you can visually see what I'm trying to talk about. In LA, they have a very outstanding model. It's been up and running for about 30 years. We're looking to make a model that's fairly applicable to Philadelphia. And if you ever know anything about police radio, there is a police division. Every police division has a radio band, for lack of a better word, and a desk. They have a radio desk. They have 2 dispatchers. In a perfect world, I would like to create a third, or like an additional, let's say a 7th. that'll be able to handle those mental health and crisis related calls. When they come in the window or come in the door, they can get funneled, instead of getting funneled directly to the divisional folks, they would be funneled to a CIT desk, for lack of a better word. And then that way there, we could coordinate the calls with CIT officers, as well as the co-responding model folks that we'll have in the field. And also behavioral health is stepping up their work as well. They're our partner in this effort. They are expanding their use of the mobile emergency teams. So these are the resources that will be embedded in the community. As for the co-responding model, we are actually looking to have a pilot up and running by the end of next month. We're saying the beginning of January, but we're looking to have identify officers who are some of our best CIT trained officers and teamed up with different clinicians that will be hired by Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disabilities. So we've been doing a ton of work. And like I said, regrettably, timing is horrible. I mean, I wish we could change things, but we've been working diligently this, and luckily with the MacArthur funds that we've gotten, we've been able to move a lot of things forward. I'm happy to answer any questions. I may have rambled a little too long, but.
No, I think you did just fine.
There was a quick question. I don't know if you just answered that. When is the Mental Health Commission partner police with clinicians plan to go live?
Like I said, as a pilot, we're looking to do the end of December, beginning of January. And like I said, I think I don't want any false expectations. We are, like I said, we're a 24/7 operation, much like we did with the police assisted diversion program. That's still in its infancy. Getting around the clock or civilians working around the clock is not as easy as one would think. So we'll be doing one tour, which I believe we're going to use the Rock North and Rock South. Okay, for those who may not know what I'm talking about, the city is divided in two, and we have a chief inspector assigned at the north side and the south side of the city. These officers will be assigned to the chief out of the chief's office. And from there, we're looking for 2 teams per rock. So that'll be 2 officers assigned with 2 clinicians in Rock North and Rock South as a first step. Then from there, we get lessons learned as we're moving through the pilot, but we're ultimately looking to expand. And obviously not just one tour, it needs to be all 3 tours. But that's our ultimate goal. We have to get it rolling. And I'll be honest with you, Commissioner Outlaw has been really instrumental. We have all been talking about a lot of things for, we're all moving forward. And at one point in time, she said, it's enough. Let's move forward. Let's get it going. And it's kind of funny, but that's what we did. We really we jump-started everything we've been doing about 3 months ago. And another thing I forgot to mention was we have the crisis intervention training for officers, which is a 40-hour training block. When we initially did this training, we did CIT training for dispatchers, but it was more of an awareness training for all the dispatchers. Dispatchers, be aware, you hear the acronym CIT, this is what it means, and these are the officers to get the training. But we didn't really include them as a part of the solution. And we really reevaluated that. And Commissioner Outlaw really said, listen, I want training for the dispatchers based on the de-escalation components that the CIT officers are trained. So there's a synergy between the dispatchers and the responding officers. And it was a great idea. A lot of other cities have done it. Smaller ones, it's much easier with smaller ones. But just so as you know, we developed my CIT coordinator, Erin O'Donnell. She was tasked with making it an 8-hour block of training for the dispatchers. And that is what we've got it at the door. We've tested it. We've run it by a lot of different people. But we've already began the training 2 weeks ago. So we have 2 classes under our belt right now for the CIT training. So it's different than what the officers get, but it works, like I said, as a synergy. They get the de-escalation component and they actually do the role plays, except their role plays are modified for call takers, receiving information versus officers acting or interacting hands-on. So we've done a lot of great stuff and I'm really proud of what we're doing, but we got a lot more to do. And I'm looking forward to that aspect as well.
Great. I have someone, Eugene, I'm going to mute you. You had a question. You were my first person.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if we had a sense of the lead time in terms of whether it's months or years. How long does it take on average for an officer who is interested in volunteering for the CIT training, which allows you to use tasers and also teach you about the de-escalation. I've been hearing that officers have been expressing interest, but it's been difficult to get enrolled. And then the other kind of question, the 988 number which Congress put in for mental health emergency hotlines. how does that connect? And is there any plans to expand 311 versus 911? Of those three numbers, where are we kind of focusing?
Yeah.
efforts? Thank you.
First, as to the backlog, sometimes it's been a little bit of a problem. The only problem we've really encountered so far is as a result of the COVID. We normally do about 7 classes a year, and we take off for the summer because vacation times are hard to schedule training. So the fact that we are behind several, since March has been a little problematic. So there has been a little bit of a waiting list. But nonetheless, we try to pump them through as much as possible. That's why we actually did the last 2 classes, even though they're smaller. What we did is we prioritized those districts that had less CIT trained officers in them. And what happens is we lose them by attrition, promotion, and all that kind of stuff. So we're always trying to evaluate where we need them the most. And that's where we chose the last one. So there may be some officers in the 15 that want it, but we may have an abundance of officers that have already volunteered. So we kind of balance it out. Now, as for the redirecting or using other resources, I do know what we have. 311 is a part of the mix without a doubt. I can't speak for other folks for the city. I can speak for what I know. The issue here is what we have on, and I didn't mention it. I mentioned all the resources we have in the field, CIT officers, the upcoming co-responders, and mobile emergency teams. But we also have a resource embedded in police radio, which is our crisis hotline. A lot of more calls should be directed towards that resource. Right now, a lot of folks think it's a suicide line. And ironically enough, for the longest time, we did not have a hot link between the suicide line, and some of my dispatchers would actually get involved in doing, suicide, So luckily we caught that several years ago, maybe 5 years ago now. And we have the hot link. Now my dispatchers stay on the call, but it's not just suicide. It's much more expansive. So I know Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disabilities wants really to a robust build up of that, so we can redirect more calls. There's a lot of calls out there that the police really don't need to show up. Somebody just wants to talk to somebody, and they really don't necessarily need 2 police officers knocking on their door. And like I said, we're training our officers the best we can. But like I said, some people just don't want to deal with the police. They're calling for help. So we're trying to make 911 not just a police response, but an overall comprehensive response. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. The next question, your hand raised, Sue. I mean, sorry, I muted you. There we go.
Okay, how you doing, gentlemen and ladies?
Hello, sir.
Ladies,
How are you, sir?
listen, we got a lot of laws on the books that has been tolerized, like graffiti, trash dumping, loud music all day into the night, drug selling. Now that weed is almost legal, those are nuisance crimes,
Mm-hmm.
which escalates into the bigger crime. And when you prioritize them, the boys on the corner incorporated them because they were low profile. They were nuisance violations. And this is why we have it in the neighborhood. They can operate without fear of the law because on the books, these crimes are as a nuisance.
Correct.
And so cause we got a group on our block and they be blasting that music in the summertime. The cop will roll right by them. And that now they do it all night. Cause
Okay.
cause the cops never, hey, come on, the volume control in the neighborhood. You can't be just blasting music like that. That's why we don't do it. But they got these laws on the books and they low profile, but all the drug boys are using them. So we just gonna go around and around because you got some good programs that's coming up. But if we got the back door open, like the laws are not up to your pace or our pace, we just gonna go around in circles. Because I've been working with the guys in my community, a mentor, OG, they all like me and I like them because I know it's just you
Well,
no
let
one-
me answer some of the question. You raise a very good point, and what it was historically, what you're talking about is the broken windows theory of policing. In the early 90s, that was a big model in policing, attack the low level stuff, and it'll stop it from becoming high level stuff. The problem, what we found out is oftentimes there's a lot of disparity occurs in those type of enforcement plans. So just so you know, I'm also involved with the Bailey case. The Bailey case is a settlement agreement that we have regarding our car stops and pet stops. And we're trying to look into the sources of racial disparity and inequity. So actually, believe it or not, some of the plaintiffs' counsel in that case have actually suggested that the enforcement of low-level offenses actually increases disparity in policing, and they have made recommendations, we haven't accepted them, actually, that we should not enforce certain low level. Now, my discussion with the plaintiff's counsel recently was, before we make any final decisions on this, we really need to have some voices like yourself in some focus groups. Like, what do you believe is driving racial disparity? It's a very academic question. I don't think anybody has all the answers, but that's what we're trying to explore right now. Just so you know, MacArthur Project as well has a racial, ethnic, and diversity subcommittee, which I'm a member of. And the goal of that subcommittee is to look at race, ethnicity, and policing, and not just policing, but in everything in the city. So we are looking at these issues, but I also said very much that we can't talk about these issues without including people like yourself, because those low level offenses, and it's hard to explain this to other people, but a lot of times in some of the most crime-ridden areas that we may have, where there's shootings and homicides, sometimes the biggest complaints that the captains get are from exactly what you're talking about. Smoking the weed, the loud music. It's not the people being shot, regrettably, but nonetheless, what do we do? So I agree wholeheartedly with you, but I tell you what, in the very near future, we will be reaching out to people like yourself to come up with a focus group. And I'd love to have your opinion on that board or the little group.
I would enjoy
We're trying to come up with a solution, and we can't do it without, we can come up with a lot of solutions.
I understand.
Community has to deal with them. So I'd much rather have you included from the get-go.
Well, most of them are transit. It's
Yep.
probably one guy who got a piece of property, and then he invites the world in. I should do that with the church, right?
I hear you, sir. No, I hear you completely. That's why I'd love to have you a part. Like, we're looking to do focus groups probably within the next 3 or 4 months when it comes to the Bailey case.
Before I get off, Anthony,
Yes, sir.
a group blasting music all day. Nice day in the morning, then they start blasting that music. That's a law that's common sense. Because when the cop turn the corner, they run and turn the music down. They used to. But when the
They
cops
used to.
started riding by, they kept it up. Then it got worse. So it was like a signal. Okay, I came by. All right, I ain't coming back down. And they went off.
No, I understand.
You see
Why
what I'm
don't you give some contact
probably-
information to Danny in the chat, and we can hook up, because there are a lot of community listening sessions that are going on and starting in North Philadelphia actually tomorrow. So why don't, if you can in the chat, get Danny your contact info, and we'll reach out to you.
Thank you for that question. Louise, I am gonna mute you if you're available.
Yes, I just had one thing to say when you talk about the mental health issues. It's also important, people do call 911. Sometimes it's a legit call. But what I suggest to the people who have to make those calls, if you register, as I do my son, he's a 41-year-old schizophrenic, autistic, cerebral palsy, you register them in your local police district. So therefore, if a call comes from your home, the 911 knows. So they know what they're coming out to deal with. And it kind of alleviates sometimes the police walking in blindly. And it stops a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And that's what we call that's our premise history system. So what happened was once you register, as was just mentioned, your name will pop up on the dispatcher screen, not your name, your location will pop up, and we could use it for not just mental health, physical disability, blind,
Exactly.
deaf, whatever. And
Exactly.
it's a great tool. We are going to push that out more than what we have. But also what I'm looking to do is for people like yourself who have family members that are suffering, there is a really great tool that I found by a NAMI. NAMI is a National Association of Mental Health, or I forget what it is, but it's a national organization, it's a local chapter. But what they put together out west is a really neat tool. It's a script for callers calling into 911. So a lot of people that have, long-term problems, they'll call 911 frequently, but oftentimes, you're doing it in a panic mode. And, you had a dispatcher trying to get information out of you. It's a very, very stressful situation. They created scripts actually for the callers when they're calling into police radio saying, this is my problem, this is what I need, and it's a very instructive tool. I'm looking to actually, I'm not gonna recreate, I'm gonna borrow.
Yeah,
Okay,
excellent. And like I said, I always register them, so I never had an
Yep.
issue,
Yep.
when they come. But
great
what I'm
tool.
saying is that needs to be known to kind of a bulletin, a PSA, so that people know that.
Yep.
Register your child. And I tell people I know, if you have a child, especially like my son being a Black man, and sometimes when he's having seizures or whatever, yeah, he's combative, But if you make that known, when they come to your address, it's a whole different scenario,
Yes.
And they need to put that out in the community. Let the officers know, whatever district you're in, let them know so they know what they're dealing with.
Yes, thank you. And for that, we are actually going to make more of an education campaign doing just that.
Thank you.
More people. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
That. Alicia, I'm going to unmute you next. That was the next question I had.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this conversation. I really appreciate everything that I'm learning that's going on in our police department. It's much needed. I'm an advocate for restorative justice, and this really sounds like restorative justice. I wanted to know if the communities, the North Points and the South Points, like what communities are those, and were there any communications with the communities about these projects going on as far as the police partnering with this mental health partner when y'all have these certain police coming out to calls. And then lastly, I wanted to add to the fact that there's loud music and the cops riding past that. That's a great concern, but I also think it's a breakdown in our culture. So when y'all hear that conversation, y'all need to bring in people that can talk about culture and help that community understand it's more than about blasting their music. It's about respecting the people, whether they're transient or not. That conversation needs to be had. And I don't know if it's exactly with the police, but some kind of way, those people need to understand it because it does become a disparity, but it's ignorance also.
So your primary question was about sort of the advertising rollout. Is that of
Right. And what exactly communities? He was saying in the North Points, that it was going to be in the North Points and the South Points of the police districts. But what communities are those? And was there any communications with the communities about the rollouts of these programs?
Okay. Did we lose Fran?
Fran might have gotten unmuted. Let me unmute him. Sorry about that. And Inspector Healy, I'm unmuting you.
Wait a minute.
Is he there?
It's on my list. I don't know why it's, there we go.
Okay.
Annie, maybe we should go to another question, get the information, and we can report back once we able to connect again with Inspector Healy.
Yeah. Great. I'll go. I believe Bilal had a question next. While you're unmuted.
I'm unmuted. Well, the question I had was for Inspector, but if he's not on.
He's on the call, so I imagine he can hear us for whatever reason.
Okay. Well, my question was, out of the number of CIT trainees, was did they have a process on outcomes of what their training they received and how often have they used it. And the reason why I answered that question is it was clearly a breakdown in the officers who were trained in the police district where Wiles was killed. And I'm wondering.
My phone talking.
Hello?
We can hear
ahead.
you below.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just wondering how those numbers, large number of volunteers have been trained, have they used their training? And does the police department have statistics or stats to show if any of them has used their training?
That's actually a very interesting question. I know we don't have Inspector Healy on at the moment, but that's something that we can definitely follow up on, because that's if they don't track that information, I'm sure they'd be interested in doing it going forward. But that's very insightful. And
Anthony, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, as to the use of their training, that, like I said, the CIT training is for de-escalation. They use it every day. Do we document every incident that they de-escalate? Probably not as much as we should, but they coordinate with our CIT coordinator. When there's a situation that's de-escalated, they reach out to her, and then she connects the individuals to the services that they need. So the CIT system is like a bridge between two worlds, the police world and the mental health and crisis related world. So the officers are using their training in a day, every day. It's not a matter of I use it at this incident. Whether they're de-escalating a person at the mall or de-escalating somebody just got their car stolen. They're using the de-escalation skills that we've taught them and the ability to shift gears from basically a crime fighter 1 minute to basically a social worker the next. So yes, I believe they use it every day. We probably it's very difficult to document it as what you're trying to refer to. But yeah, the officers actually use this very much. And they all actually, and I say this not to toot my own horn by any stretch, but of all the training, I've had more officers come back and said that not only is this training useful on the job, but it's as useful off the job, dealing with neighbors and friends and family on how to de-escalate and actually connect people with services. So.
Well, Inspector, this is Bilal again. How are you? Can you hear me?
I hear you, sir.
I think that you need to be able to document that. That's not acceptable to me what your answer was. It has to be documented because otherwise we don't know if it's working or it doesn't work. And everything today, excuse me, sir, everything today has to be measured. So I just think you hear me strongly saying that I don't know what the process you have to use to document that, but you need to document it so that the citizens know that that the training is working. Right now, we don't know if it's working. Wiles is a perfect example. There's a whole bunch of questions raised about policies not being followed. And it was supposed to be individuals at their police district who was trained that could have came on site. And I know this is all after the fact, what people would say, but it's real. So I'm just strongly recommending that the department, and it's under you, put in a process for how you would keep these statistics and data for the officers that are using the training.
I'm sure that's something we can talk about further. Because I think that's a pretty good idea.
Our CIT coordinator manages all that data.
Okay.
I think I had a question from Rob next. I'm gonna unmute you, Rob Roy.
I have a kind of a semantic question in the term crisis. Like, how are we defining crisis? Because if someone is resorting to illicit criminal markets because they feel it's like a limited option to financially survive and that's like their best option, that sounds like a crisis. So how are we defining crisis?
You raise the heart and soul of trying to identify these calls. I'll be honest with you, you'll find other jurisdictions across the country say we've had 100,000 crisis related calls. Well, what is a crisis? I mean, it's a very, very, I guess, a broad category. And like I said, when we talk to our CIT officers, I make it very clear, it's not mental health. It's not just mental health. Mental health is a subset. But like I said, if you have ever encountered a mother at the mall who've just lost her child, or if you lost your child, you're in a form of crisis when that cop shows up. And making sure that the officer understands that the crisis, because here's the important thing. When people are in crisis, they say and do stupid things. Okay, and when an officer expects that to happen, then there's no overreaction. And that's really the heart and soul of the CIT. Understanding there's a crisis, you shift gears, they're going to say and do stupid things. The checks and balances in people's minds. So you're saying if somebody's trying to feed their family, doing something the wrong way, well, I mean, I don't necessarily think they're going to be the police are being called on those type of calls. But if they do, and the person's stressed out over whatever, I mean, I was personally called out a year or so ago on an individual at the library. The library had to lay him off, or he was getting fired. I forget, one or the other. But nonetheless, he made a stupid statement, and everybody took it as a threat, and everybody wanted him arrested. And this was a gentleman just having a real bad day. And after we got to speak to him, after I got to talk to him for a little while, he had a whole lot of other things going on. This was just the what do you call it? That breaks the straw that broke the camel's back. So we were able to talk to him, just calm him down. We're able to hook him up with services, and he's fine now. He didn't get arrested. He said something stupid that out of context, he would have been arrested for terroristic threats. It wasn't terroristic threats. It was a man in crisis that said something stupid, and we were able to recognize that and not put him through the criminal justice system. And we got him help. We got him the help he needed, and I think he's actually working somewhere else in the city now. So it does work, but the issue is recognizing what you're walking into makes a world of difference. But I do agree with you. Crisis is a very broad term, and that's where a lot of people want to say, well, how many crisis calls did you get? Well, not very, very, does anybody call 911 when they're not in a crisis of some sort? But we're trying to make sure we can direct the right resources. And that's why we have the CIT officers, we have the co-responding models, we have the mobile emergency teams that aren't police officers, they're from the Department of Behavioral Health. We all want to be able to have them dispatched from the same kind of the same area. So we actually have resources going out to the right things. So the right people and the right training are going out to the right people. So we're doing the best we can right now. But I do agree with you that definition of a crisis, it changes from everybody. And I'll be honest with you, I use in my training. If I'm taking up too much time, Anthony, please let me know.
No, fire away.
But in my training, I actually tell the officers, and I asked them, I said, how many people here have been in crisis? And of course, everything, well, I've never been in crisis. I said, well, is everybody here human? And of course, they all raised their hand. I said, the reality is a couple of years ago, my house was being burglarized. I didn't know at the time. Girlfriend calls me and she says, listen, what were you looking for? And this is public information now, I guess after I say it now, but apparently when I lose things, I blame other people, okay, in my house. If I move something, I don't lose anything. My family moves it on me. So I get angry. I throw things around. I rip drawers apart looking for things that I personally lost. So she calls me like, what the heck were you looking for in the bedroom? And the spidey senses went up. I told her to get out of the house. At that point, they had already beaten up my dog, threw him in the yard, and she had walked in on an active burglary. So luckily, they ran out the back door. But I asked my officers, I said, what state of mind do you think I was from 8th and Race to my house in the Northeast Philadelphia? And they're like, I said, well, what class are you in? I'm in crisis. And the issue is now, if I was chased up 95 by the state troopers, I wouldn't have stopped. I'm going to tell you right now. Now, in a normal situation, normal day, yes, absolutely. But I would never have stopped. And then why? Because you're not hitting on all cylinders. Your brain's not when you're in crisis. And having an officer recognize that makes the world of difference at that moment in time. Like I said, I'm not the criminal fleeing. I'm trying to get home to see my family. And so it kind of breaks home. And that's kind of things I do in the CIT training because I let them make it very real. I tell them all the stupid things that I've done. I got 30 some odd years on the job. And like I said, I made mistakes. I wish I could change them, but I hope they don't make them. I know better now than what I did 30 years ago.
Thank you, Inspector Healy. Alicia, I don't know that you got your question fully answered because
yeah, I apologize. I broke off.
That's okay. Danny, can you please unmute Alicia and you can ask your question again. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I apologize.
No problem. I really just wanted to know what communities is the North Points that you were talking about, and if there was any communication with those communities about the mental health partners. I think it's important to talk to the communities and inform them about what you all are offering, and even about the information that the mom had said earlier, how she mentioned that she informs the police department about her son being schizophrenic. I think that type of information should be shared with the community, especially if you're rolling out these type of programs. And this really sounds like restorative justice. So I'm really happy to hear that you all are doing this work. Is great work.
Thank you. And just so as you know, a lot of this work is coming out of the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge. And part of that program actually has a community engagement component. We actually have a community engagement committee that actually we float everything that we're doing through this committee. So and they actually go back and report to different communities what we're doing. So yes, we don't want to do what we're doing in a vacuum saying, this is what you need. No, the community has very much a say in what they're doing. And like I said, it keeps us on our toes, because sometimes we run down a path thinking the community needs this. And the community says, no, I don't want that. We need something different. So it's incredibly important to have your insight. Now, to your first question, as the Rock North, what we've done is there's basically the south part of the city, from Center City South and west, is mostly Rock South, and everything above that line is Rock North. And that's everything. You know, they have police districts and police divisions, but a chief inspector oversees each half of the city. So that's those people in those communities are being made aware of what we're doing through the MacArthur Community Engagement Committee. So we have very much tried to include the community in everything we're doing.
So how do I get in touch with that committee? Because I've never heard of none of this.
Sure.
I happened to get an email or something on Facebook about this today. I think it was on Facebook.
Sure.
So how do we learn about
if you just provide your information in the chat or give it to Anthony Arachi, I'll connect you with the chairman of the community engagement committee. And
Thank you so
you
much.
can make the connection. Yeah. Absolutely.
Alicia, you can
Just follow up
send
with
your
us.
information privately to Danny or Anthony.
Okay.
through
Thank
the
you.
chat.
We'll get you where you need to go.
Thanks.
Awesome. Sean, I believe, had the next question. Sean?
First of all, I just want to say thank you for being here tonight. I am one of the commissioners. I also see Councilman Jones here. Thank you for being here tonight. So I'm also a disability advocate, and a lot of times when a police officer is dealing with someone that is autistic or have a disability, that might be deaf or might have any other type of disability or handicap, that officer don't always recognize what's going on, right? So what is your department doing to be make more aware of the disability culture in Philadelphia, and what training are y'all provided besides mental health?
Yes, thanks for the question. Just so as you know, all officers come out of the academy with training from the state. The state mandates a certain minimum training, and they actually, much like doctors and lawyers, have regular annual training. Much of that has to do with disabilities and special needs individuals. That training is done through the police academy and through what's called the Municipal Police Officers Training and Education Commission. In addition to that, just recently, we just recently implemented a new policy for deaf and hard of hearing And we're also looking for, I'm working on making more awareness for different disabilities, handicap, disabled, physically disabled, like how to handle people with wheelchairs and stuff like that. As for the developmental disabilities, that's very much well taken care of in our crisis intervention. We have a very big section in there, and we actually have family members that come in and actually give lessons to the police officers how to deal with their children with disabilities. But we're trying to do a comprehensive package. Like I said, I began with the deaf and hard of hearing. We have policies in place for handicapped people, but I think they could be much more comprehensive, and I'm in the process of working on them as well. So we're trying to attack everything. I mean, everybody in my view or my position, I had certain issues when I was a child, so I spent a great deal of time in Shriners Hospital. So I have an affinity for people with disabilities because we all are going to be disabled at one point in time. So making sure that we have accommodations for the officers and making sure they have resources on how to deal with different people is incredibly important. One of the things we didn't have, honestly, for quite the longest time, we never had a van to transport people with wheelchairs. That's part of the police accreditation process. We have a paratransit. We actually have 2 of them now, I believe. That in the event somebody with in a wheelchair needs to be transported, we don't put them in the back of a paddy wagon anymore. That's offensive. So now we have a van, we can lock them in. So it's our efforts. We're trying to be as responsive as possible for people with disabilities, knowing that we all will be one day disabled, one shape or another.
Thank you, Inspector Healy. Sean, thank you for alerting us that Councilmember Jones joined us this evening. And Councilmember, we want to thank you for your leadership on the ballot initiative. You've been a real champion. I think we want to see if we have additional questions on Inspector Healy's presentation about the reforms to the 911 emergency response, and then we'll open it up for public comment.
Yep, Sarah, you were the next question. I think I'm unmuting you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you, Inspector Healy, for coming and sharing all this information. I have a question about how the police department has measured the scale of the need for responses or for dispatches in response to 911 calls that you're deeming to be from folks in crisis. As the discussion has shown this evening, I think it's hard to define those who are in crisis, and it can be a very broad application to those calls. I'm wondering how the police department has or is currently measuring the need of the future imagined response of officers in partnership with mental health trained individuals to respond to those calls that are deemed crisis.
Just so you know, this isn't an issue just for Philadelphia. It's very difficult for a lot of other police departments across the country to identify crisis calls. That is the very purpose of the first step in our co-responding model is embedding the mental health clinician. Her job is to help try to evaluate these calls coming in so we can come up with a methodology to identify them better and so we can redirect them. The answer right now is we kind of go fly by the seat of our pants, which is not acceptable. And so this is why we definitely put her in that place, in that position, to actually work with the call takers. And she's analyzing the calls, she's listening to the calls and figuring out what common denominators can we put together so we can identify them faster, push them out to the right people quicker. So that is definitely what we are working on now. That's exactly the purpose of her being at police radio for that purpose.
I guess my question is not how do you categorize or identify those calls that are coming from crises, but that how do you know how big the problem is so that you can be investing the proper resources to tackle it?
Honestly, like I said, we don't know. I mean, that's the purpose of trying to get the person there so we can start to get some statistics and data. But as it stands right now, we really don't have hard and fast data on the volume of calls. I mean, I can say anecdotally, a large number of calls come in, like I said, and the issue is some folks will narrow it down to mental health calls. and other calls, like I think it's much more expansive. It's crisis, because I care what happens when the officer intersects with that person, whether or not they have mental illness, whether or not they have drug addiction issues and co-occurring disorders. I don't really care the problem that they're having. I mean, I don't mean that to sound bad, but I care about the officer knowing that the person is in some form of crisis and doesn't overreact. And so, like I said, it's a work in progress. I'll be very honest. We honestly don't know. And that's very much the reason why we have the person in police radio now, so we can come up with a method so we can start tracking data much better.
Thank you.
Great. Looks like Mujib has his hand raised. Mujib, I'm going to unmute you. Oop. Mujib, looks like it's
Not unmuted yet.
There we go.
Okay, in case of Mr. Wallace, and when he was get shot in West Philadelphia, I have a question that what is the percentage of our officers are trained in taser? Because it was very surprising for me that there was one option that they could have used the taser instead of they have to use the extra force on that. What is the percentage of our officers are trained how to use the taser? Thank you.
Yeah, the tasers, and this is, again, my personal opinion, are not the end all be all for less than the use of force, or less than lethal force. It's a nice piece of equipment, but in fact, they do kill and maim quite a few people across the country every year. We've had incidents in Philadelphia as well. So as of such, when we implemented the crisis intervention training program, the goal was to give crisis intervention trained officers tasers, so that before they actually have to deploy a taser, they have additional resources, de-escalation skills. So that was the model that we used in Philadelphia. Like I said, I believe there's going to be an effort to get every officer tasers in Philadelphia. Like I said, that may be nice, but I don't necessarily believe that the taser is the answer to everything. The tasers were designed to overcome resistance of a person who's trying to be arrested, or that we're trying to arrest. They don't stop forward motion oftentimes, and there's a large percentage of times that they don't work. So they're a nice piece of equipment, but I don't want anybody having a misperception that it's the magic solution to using deadly force. Deadly force is regrettable. Trust me, it's a tragedy for everyone involved when deadly force has to be used. It's the ultimate responsibility of any cop that none of us ever want to have to use. And I'll be honest with you. That's the worst feeling any officer would have to go through. So as it stands now, more officers will probably be given tasers, and we are expanding the CIT program, but that's the reason why those officers didn't have it. They were not CIT trained officers. They did not have tasers for that reason.
Thank you for that question, Mujib. I believe those were all the main questions for Inspector Healy, I think, but there's one more question. Jacqueline Wiggins, I'm gonna unmute you. Jacqueline, I tried to unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
ma'am.
Okay, I thank you. I'm sorry I had to come in late, but I just did get in. But my question is similar to the question I posed last time, which is the agreements between the Philadelphia Police Department and other policing entities, such as universities, Philadelphia Housing Authority, SEPTA Transit, and so forth. Number one, do these other entities have geographic boundaries that they can only, are they supposed to take care of Philadelphia Housing Authority people and not everybody else? And another question has to do with the training. If everyone goes to the police academy, is that the very exact same training as the Philadelphia Police Department? Is it less? Is it more?
Well, I can't answer questions for other jurisdictions as to what their boundaries are. What I can tell you though, MPO, which is Municipal Police Officer Training Education, is consistent across the state. So if you're a licensed police officer in Philadelphia, you receive the same training. If you're a licensed police officer in University of Penn, Temple, or Drexel, they receive the same training as we do. One thing I will say this is the our crisis intervention training program by word of mouth. A lot of local jurisdictions have asked to be a part of it. Now it's primarily Philadelphia, so but I've always made spaces available for other jurisdictions who wanted to send police officers to my CIT training. So there's a large number of those people in those departments. University of Penn, Temple have a large number of officers that have actually gone through the CIT training with my officers. So they've received the same training there. Like I said, I can't talk about the different jurisdictions. Everyone's slightly different. So I can't really, each one, I'd have to talk about each one, but I would really defer to, like, if you want to talk about what SEPTA's jurisdiction is, there's instruments, legislative or legal instruments under the statute that gives them their authority. And that's where what they can do and what they can't do. Same thing for housing. Those documents are drafted, and I would really be uncomfortable talking about what their full jurisdiction is and where it ends.
But can any of these entities, even if they're within a geographic boundary, I think Temple sort of ends at 19th or 18th Street, for example, can any of Temple Police, for example, stop, question, detain, and arrest citizens?
Yes, they have full police powers.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm sorry, I can't remember the commissioner's name. I think it was Singleton or Singletary, where he said there's not been a great, I guess, job with respect to letting the public know. So I'm going to ask, is the public aware of this policing power with all of these policing entities?
That I honestly, I wouldn't know. I mean, I think within their communities, within the university's communities, I think it's well known, but I don't know, like I said, that's a very good question. I don't know how, if local, like, community members know how to distinguish it, or are they distinguishable from Philadelphia police versus like a housing police officer going to and from an assignment versus a pen? I honestly don't know. That's a good question.
And Jacqueline, that's actually something we can try to look into and help educate the public on. So if you can give your contact information to Danny, we can try to figure out a way to not only answer your question, but also make that answer sort of more publicly available, so we can assist.
Yeah, thank you, because I think that there are things that we're not knowing. So, for example, there was something that occurred at one of the recreation centers, and the person that the advisory council member saw it and called the Philadelphia police, but Temple showed up and she said, I didn't call you. You know, I called the Philadelphia Police Department. So there needs to be some type of understanding.
Yeah, that's a great point and a great issue. Give your contact information to Danny, and we'll make sure we try to reach out to you. The educating the public is a big part of what we do, and we want to make sure that everyone knows sort of what the rules of the road are and what to expect.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
There was another question from Rob. Rob, I'm gonna unmute you quickly. Oop. Sorry. There we go.
Sorry. So Jacqueline's question about geography sparked in my mind that as Inspector Healy, as you mentioned about tasers not being the answer in relation to what happened to Walter Wallace, I'm under the understanding that within a 21-foot radius of space between an officer and someone with a knife, it's considered that the knife could be deadly within 21 feet. So what is being done as far as protocols to just, when there's someone with a knife, just step back so you're outside of a 21-foot radius?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
I mean, as you talked about, like a taser may not necessarily be the most appropriate tool. And so was thinking about the incident that happened to Walter Wallace and geographic proximity almost, where if a knife is considered generally deadly, it's from my understanding of training that something like a knife could be deadly within 21 feet is the general guesstimate. Why not then just stay outside of the radius of 21 feet? So then it's not generally considered deadly if it's 22 feet away.
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, I sure as heck try to stay out of that 21 feet when someone's coming at me with a knife, but oftentimes it's not possible. When you're being chased, it's a very difficult thing to say. And I would venture to say the 21 feet, if someone's advancing with a knife, like I said, I can't comment on this case. I don't know all the particulars about it, so I can't comment. It's an open criminal case, an open investigation. But But I can just say from the training, a lot of the training videos you can see online, you can see how quickly something can escalate with a knife. So I'm not saying that we can't have other tools, cover, concealment. There's other mechanisms. You back up as much as possible. I mean, and that's the big thing. Like I said, one thing is when you know the type of person or if person has issues, being able and letting them run down the street. But let me back down. If you've already shifted gears, you know somebody's got some mental health issues and they're running around. There's no, I mean, you get everybody else out of the way the best you can. But sometimes it just in the heat of the moment, you just don't have the time. And like I said, I can't second guess anyone else. I've never had to shoot at anyone, thank God, and I never want to. But being put in that position, it's very difficult. You got to make that split-second judgment call. And like I said, that's what we're held accountable to it. But nonetheless,
I mean, my call, but the split-second judgment call goes into once you're in the 21-foot radius, then that increases the likelihood of the split-second judgment call. So I'm just more of like just stepping back. So just slow down so you don't need to make that. And instead of like standing your ground, you know, which is so, I mean, I just saw the video. So, I mean, that's all that I know.
Right. Okay.
Question. I think there was, hold on. I think those are all my questions. Oh, nope, somebody raised their hand. Brianna?
Hi, yes, thank you so much for holding this meeting. I just had a question about kind of everything that we were talking about. And it seems like you pointed out that, you know, tasers might not be the most effective device to use in these situations. And it kind of sounds like we're asking our police officers to be trained mental health professionals, which doesn't seem like it's logistically feasible. So what would you kind of do? I guess this is a two-part question. If you had the resources, like unlimited monetary support, what would you do to kind of make sure that situations like what happened to the murder of, you know, Walter Wallace, that those situations don't happen again? And also, do you think that the money being spent on giving police officers tasers could be used to increase funding for like actual mental health professionals, or like to, you know, increase the infrastructure that Philadelphia has in place to deal with crises like this?
Anthony, why don't you lead on the answer? Excuse me, Inspector. Anthony, you want to lead, and then certainly the inspector can follow up?
Sure. I mean, I think that the conversation in and of itself is about finding multi-pronged approaches to sort of all of these different problems. Like you want to have a lot of options, right? I mean, you want to be able to identify these callers. You want to have mental health professionals in the 911 call center. You want to have cops that are properly trained to deal with these sort of emerging situations. People in various stages and forms of crisis. I mean, there's not going to be a sort of one solution, like this is what we do with this money and it solves the problem. I think that policing in and of itself, and I think Inspector Healy was talking about this a little bit earlier, it's really nuanced, and it's hard to find a single solution to any problem, right? I mean, and even the question that Rob was talking about. I mean, like you're talking about tactical solutions and options to try to avoid a negative outcome. And there's never one solution to that. So, I mean, I think that when you're reimagining what public safety means, is you're trying to figure out what the public expects, what they want, and how to deliver it in a way that keeps the most people safe, right? I mean, these interactions, you're never going to keep everybody safe, but you don't want to fail because you didn't have enough options and you didn't have enough training, right? So, I mean, and I think to your question, that's what and how you use money, right? I mean, like to train and staff, it's going to be a diverse sort of holistic ideal, right? I mean, and that's in a perfect world, right? I mean, ideally, if we had an infinite amount of money, we would be able to instantly diagnose like the crux of an issue and deploy the most reasonable resource to it, right? But that's really never going to be the case, right? So because we're never going to have an infinite amount of money, and we're never going to have an army of mental health professionals and an army of police officers standing by perfectly trained to deal with every conceivable outcome. But what we can do is recognize reality, right? So if we recognize reality and we acknowledge what the community expects, we can more reasonably allocate the funds we have to solving those problems. So, I mean, I hope that was a start. So
Thank you, Anthony. And Inspector, I apologize. I didn't mean to cut you off. So please.
I figured I'm getting a hook. That's all.
no hook.
Not
It's
yet.
okay.
Not yet. If you have anything to add to Brianna's question, please do.
No, I thought Anthony answered it really well. I mean, in a perfect world, I would love to be able to know upfront what my officers are walking into. And regrettably, that's probably the most difficult thing to get, but having all those resources, other resources and police officers is what I would hope for. So we're on the right path. Like I said, and the tasers are a nice tool, but it's part of an overall package, it's not going to solve the problems. Being able to divert officers away from calls and place mental health clinicians in the front lines with us, I think will have a dramatic impact in the communities we serve.
Thank you.
Looks like Anita Hall had a question. I'm unmuting you. There we go.
God bless. God bless you and good evening. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Good. I have a few things I want to say. One, I do want to speak to recognizing reality, since that was a statement that was made. But I've seen there's been so many instances where there is, to me, a presumption of guilt when it comes to dealing with Black people with police officers. There is the reality for many of us is disparate treatment with police officers. My husband has been stopped a couple times, put up against the wall with a gun to his head, with the allegation from the police, oh, we had someone who fit your description. I've called the police for help in reference to someone taking something from my property, and was asked, well, do you have the deed, to this lot? And I says, I don't walk around with the deed. Bottom line, after everything was said and done, I wound up in the back of the police car. In reference to these incidences where someone gets shot like Mr. Wallace, where there had been previous calls. There was the family knew, the neighbors knew this young man had mental health illness, and it seems as though in many instances that deadly force is used as opposed to maiming someone. If someone is coming, towards you, and the people are yelling and screaming, telling the police officer that this person has a mental health issue. You hear the mother screaming and yelling, trying to avoid the police from shooting at Mr. Wallace. It seems to me that what happens too frequently, particularly when it comes to people of color and Black men, is a disparate treatment. The laws themselves are disparate. How cocaine is viewed in the law and crack is viewed is different. It's just disparate treatment. There's more frequency of stop and frisk when it comes to people of color. The reality for people of color when it deals with law enforcement is that there's a presumption of guilt as opposed to a presumption of innocence. And often in the Black community, when we might need help to try to de-escalate a situation, the last person you want to call is a police officer because of the likelihood of things really going the wrong way. And that's the reality for many people of color when it comes to dealing with police, because we are not traditionally treated the same. On April the 1st of this year, a young man was laying on the ground. He was moaning something. I came outside my house. I saw the ambulance across the street, and I thought it was a neighbor, who had medical diabetic issues. And I turned and looked, and I saw 4 police officers standing over the guy. They were standing laughing. None of them had masks on. The man is laying on the ground moaning, and then the cop goes over and tells the ambulance driver, "Oh, we got a moaner here." And he goes back, stands over the guy with his, other officers laughing. I just started video and recording it. And then a gentleman drives around the corner. He stops across the street from me, and he goes to approach the officers, and they say, they're yelling, stand back, stand back. And he says, "I think this might be my cousin who's sick." And then they says, "Oh, we're trying to find out if something's wrong." And he comes back to me, and I said, "That's not true. They sent the ambulance away." And I kept recording. I'm just telling you that there's a mistrust in the Black community when we deal with law enforcement. The laws themselves are disparate, and it causes us to be stopped more frequently, incarcerated more often, have to pay. Well, we had all these charges and bail money that some people could not pay. They wind up incarcerated. If they had a job, they lose their job. The family becomes displaced. It's just, we lived in the United States, and we realize, being people of color, that we are not treated equally. And that's just the bottom line. That's the reality that many of us face when it comes to law enforcement. That's just how it is. This is America. And it's founded on being unjust when it comes to people of color. Nothing has changed.
Ms. Annette, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that you put that better than anyone I've ever heard. It's these times are changing, and these conversations are now public where they used to just be neighborhood specific. And now, even recently, we just had a ballot on the question, or a ballot question that established this issue for all of Philadelphia finally. And I think that nothing's going to take away the past, and the community pain is real, but now it's real and it's out front, and it is now we have the opportunity to really push forward and make some changes. And I think that what you said here today, I've never heard it put better. And the only thing I can say is I hope that we as a city and as an oversight agency don't miss this moment.
I want to share my thanks and appreciation to Ms. Hall for adding that to our meeting. It's something that needs to be part of every meeting that we have. I think that I'm in consideration of the time. Danny, there's one more question. Is that what you told me?
Yes, there is. I did also just want to say, Anita, if you have that video and want to send me your email and are able to share it, I can send you the PAC email. One of our staff members, Angelica, said if you wanted to share that with us, we can definitely look into it. Liza, you were the next question I had. Oops, sorry, I think.
Hi, thank you so much for this opportunity, this conversation. It's been really great. My question is going back to what we were discussing about the idea of realism versus infinite resources. And my question is this, like, obviously there are still police officers that are in Philadelphia that are not de-escalating? And what is the problem? Is it that we don't have enough money or enough time or enough trainers or enough will? Like, what is it, if you were gonna say, I'm just to the inspector, you're gonna say like the one thing that's really stopping everybody from learning this, what is that?
I don't think there's one thing. We have, like I said, we have more CIT trained officers than probably by percentage than any other large department to my knowledge. I mean, so it's not as if we are not trying to get the best trained officers out into the field. This is a 40-hour training block, and I think it's important to note that this is not, well, you could theoretically say, let's put a training package together, pump out every cop. The issue is the quality of our program is what I think makes it outstanding. The issue is it's not taught by police. It's taught by people that are in such different forms of recovery, we actually have a youth component that participate in the role play. Each of them have usually had either a bad encounter of some sort based on their disability with an officer in the past. So they bring that to the table for these officers. So I don't think it's a matter of what we're not doing. The issue is, I think the problems, there are a lot of people have a lot of problems. And regrettably, over time, they've all come to rely on 911 to get the help they need. So we need to readjust and retool as a police agency, understanding that we aren't the only resource out there. There's a lot of other resources, and we need to be able to connect people in real time with those resources faster. Police officers, and like I said, some people think we should just be fighting crime. That's true, but we're there to serve people. I mean, we need to make people feel safe. And if you call me because you fell in your house and you need an officer to help pick you up, that's as important to me as, catching criminals. It's making people feel safe in their houses. So I think we have the officers, we have a strong contingent of very compassionate officers, and I have an outstanding mental health, a CIT coordinator who takes these cases personal and connects the services and follows up. So we're doing everything humanly possible. And like I said, we're looking to just make it even better. Taking this to the next level with the co-responding models, the expansion by DBH of the mobile emergency teams, meaning there's going to be that many more resources available that weren't available as of last year. So I think we're moving in the right direction. And I do like, I think in a perfect world, I just like having those alternate resources than police. Like I said, we don't have the answers to everything, but I'm looking forward to having all these different, more resources in the field for people, or to respond to people in the field. I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector Healy. I want to thank everyone who joined us this evening, who asked hard questions, who offered hard truths. And I think that this format of a Zoom meeting has allowed us to reach out to more folks. Our next meeting is December 14th. I think the agenda says the 21st, but in deference to the holiday season, we've moved it up a week to the 14th. Is that right, Danny?
That is correct.
Okay.
Also, I put in the chat, if anyone, if you aren't already and would like to join our mailing list, that's where we send out up-to-date information about when our next meetings are, as well as other resources. So that link is in the chat, and also right on our website, you can sign up for our email listserv.
Thank you. Thank you. I think our business here is done. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Looks like
I have
Ben.
a second. Ben and Sean is our second. All in favor? All right, everyone. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you in December.
Thank you,
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Night.